Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Saturdays for the Byzantines podcast. My name is Professor Wren. I'm your host. My typical disclaimer, I am not a professor, not employed by any university in the United States or otherwise. Don't even have a PhD. I simply view this as a way to almost like teach a sort of Byzantine history class. And if that were to happen, it almost certainly occur at the university level because very few high schools, secondary schools are doing any sort of history like this. So if I were to present this class in a college setting, I would be called professor because I don't have a doctorate. If you don't have a doctorate, you're typically referred to as professor, although sometimes people call people with doctorates formalities. If you're finding this on YouTube, please make sure to like the video, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another episode. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Play, please give us a 5-star review and give us a follow as well. Decent reaction. I posted our first short video. I'll be posting maybe somewhere between 1 and 3 short 5 to 15-minute videos kind of during the week of topics which I don't get to cover in the main podcast. This week, what we're doing now is going to be a main podcast. We're talking about the Visigoths. Today we're going to have a lecture on the Visigoths. However, this might be a little shorter than our typical ones. I'm not entirely sure yet, but we'll see. My notes for this are not quite as long as usual. So I guess without further ado, we can just hop right into this. So we're talking about the Visigoths here, and I apologize that I'll be looking over in this direction. I wasn't able to have printed notes for today. We had another snow day at the school where I work, and I don't have a printer at home right now. And so I have another screen up with my notes instead of having like a printout that I would typically have in front of me. So bear with me on this. But for the Visigoths, the most important guy we're going to be talking about is the guy we have on screen right now, Alaric. Alaric becomes the leader of the Goths as they're settled in the Roman Empire in about 391. About 391 is when Alaric comes to the leadership, to the leading role for the Visigoths. We're going to see here, not too long, there's going to be another split in the Goths. So previously we had multiple Gothic groups. We had the two main ones were the Greathungi and the Tervingi. Now we're going to have another split between the Gothic groups. We're going to have the Ostrogoths, who we'll talk about later, and the Visigoths, who again we're talking about today. The Visigoths, as we'll see, they'll move further west, and the Ostrogoths will stay a little further east. They're not going to go as far west. The Visigoths are going to end up in Spain. The Ostrogoths are going to end up in Italy. So when Alaric becomes the king of the Visigoths, one of the first things he does is he attempts to rebel against Roman rule. Remember, the Goths are essentially living in Rome at the behest of the Roman Empire. They're sort of living as their subjects, and so Alaric is going to try to break free here, and attempt to assert some sort of independence. However, he is going to be defeated by the Emperor Theodosius and resubjugated, essentially. Now, a couple of years after this, in 394, the Visigoths are going to fight with the Romans in a battle, I believe I've mentioned this before, called the Battle of the Frigidus, where they're fighting a Western Roman usurper whose name is Eugenius, one of the few usurpers in this time period who doesn't have the Max in his name. It's not a Maxentius or a Maximus, etc. Notice just kind of as we do this, many usurpers who are named something with Max, Maxentius, Maximus, so on and so forth. But so Alaric and the Visigoths fight alongside with Theodosius at the Battle of Frigidus. And unfortunately for the Visigoths, what happens is, although they are on the winning side of the battle, the Romans kind of use them as meat shields. There's a large number of Goths, and I've estimated several thousand Goths die at the Battle of the Frigidus. And essentially what the Romans do is they put the Goths forward and they absorb the initial waves of the battle. And then as the enemy is sort of worn down, the Romans bring in their own troops, the non-federati barbarian troops, to finish the job after the enemy has already been worn down. And the Goths don't like that. Believe it or not, people don't like it when you use them as meat shields and have no regard for their lives, right? So the Goths are going to remember this. They're really not happy about this. They're not fully integrated into Roman society. They still sort of live apart from Roman society. Now, obviously, as we've kind of talked about, there are individuals who will integrate into Roman society and become somewhat indistinguishable, at least in appearance, from Romans. However, there are a lot of barbarians who are still living almost completely separately from Roman society itself. Now, Alaric, after the Battle of the Frigidus, is given the title of Comes, which means count. So he's given the title of count for his bravery and service in the battle, but he was hoping for a bit of a better title. He was hoping for more of a promotion, I guess, more of a magister militum type deal, which leaves him kind of salty. I guess he thought that after he and his people sacrificed so much, he should have gotten a better title. However, for the Romans, handing out titles in gold is never actually going to work. No matter how much gold the Romans give people, no matter how many titles they give people, it's not going to stop the barbarians from doing anything. They're not going to stop them from invading, sacking, raiding, etc. Now, obviously, in 395, Emperor Theodosius dies, and Alaric views his treaty with the Romans as essentially null and void. He made the treaty with Theodosius. Theodosius is gone. We no longer have to abide by this treaty. And as we've talked about as well before, the death of Theodosius is sort of an early, almost death knell for the Roman Empire, because it's going to leave the empire in the hands of Theodosius's two young sons who are highly incompetent, one named Honorius and one named Arcadius. Honorius is going to be the Western Emperor, and Arcadius is going to be the Eastern Emperor. Both of them are teenagers. I believe Arcadius was the older one, and he was something like 18 or 19. And then Honorius was the younger brother, and he was something like 16, I want to say, when he ascended the throne. So I guess we can't be too critical. How would you do as a 16-year-old in charge of half of the Roman Empire? I guess you could ask that question. But at the same time, it is under their leadership that really Rome descends into almost nearly in the East, it's going to, it'll survive. The East is much more strong and stable, but the West, it's essentially, it's the beginning of the end. Honorius is the beginning of the end. So Alaric, he actually leads the Visigoths immediately on a march east towards Constantinople. Again, understand that the Visigoths are living in the modern Balkans, essentially, and so the closest, richest target is probably for them Constantinople, although maybe hit up Thessalonica along the way. And so they make a march on Constantinople to try to sack it, but he is held up for a while by the Western Roman general Stellico for several months. We've talked about Stellico a couple of times in this lecture series. Stellico is really he's the second ranking man in the Western Roman Empire. This was the battle. I'm terrible about flipping the slides. I have to get better at this. So this is an artistic interpretation of the Battle of the Frigidus. As you can kind of see here, right, you've got the Roman who's by the horse, and he's standing tall and looks very good. But then on the right-hand side of the picture here, you've got the two Goths who are kind of leaning on each other. And I think the idea here is that they're supposed to be Gothic soldiers, and they're kind of, limping away from the battlefield because they've been so badly damaged during this battle. And here we have Stellico. Okay, and like I said, Stellico is really the glue that's holding the empire together, or at least the Western Empire at this point in time. He really should be emperor. However, Roman practices at the time, Stellico was half Vandal, and so you had to be a full-blooded Roman in order to ascend to the imperial throne. Now, however, even though Stilicho is going to hold up the Vandal, or not the Vandals, the Visigoths, excuse me, two V's. He holds up the Visigoths for a while. He's actually recalled from that assignment, from that mission, and that's going to allow there we go again, the Visigoths to go raiding through Greece and Macedonia. And that later on, however, Stellico is going to return to fight Alaric. This is a little while later, but he's going to be recalled again, which prevents him from finishing this. Some people speculate that perhaps Stellico, this was his idea, not to finish the job against Alaric because he had some sympathies towards him because they're both barbarians. I don't necessarily see that as the case. I mean, Stellico, although half Vandal, really does act more like a Roman than he does like a barbarian. And as well, they're two different tribes, right? The Vandals and the Visigoths, and the Vandals and the Visigoths don't necessarily like each other. The Visigoths are going to be the ones who drive the Vandals out of Spain and eventually put them in the position where moving into North Africa is very, it's a pretty good deal for them. It looks pretty good. So I don't necessarily buy the idea that Stellico is going easy on Alaric because they're both, you know, have Germanic backgrounds. Now in 398, the Romans are going to offer Alaric a Roman military title as an attempted appeasement. But as we'll see, this is going to become a common mistake. As I mentioned earlier, you know, as we'll talk about with the Huns, you know, the Romans end up sending the Huns like upwards of thousands of pounds of gold, right? And really money that the empire doesn't have. I mean, we'll talk about this when we do our episode on the Huns. You're going to have senators paying out personally out of their pocket to send gold to the Huns, and it's like, well, why are you even doing that? Like, you see, you know, the Romans by this point have seen how these barbarian groups work. They've done plenty of interactions with them. They've attempted to appease them with money and land and titles, and none of it ever works. You know, you might buy yourself a little bit of time, but ultimately, you know, they're still going to end up attacking you. They're still going to end up invading you. They're going to break the treaties, and it's going to be wasted money. You're basically throwing money in a hole in the ice. You know, that's money you're never going to get back. It's not really doing anything other than buying you time. You know, it's either you get attacked, you fight them now, or you fight them later. And when the Romans choose to fight them later, they're also now strapped for cash because they just sent them, you know, hundreds and thousands of, not hundreds of thousands, but, you know, upwards of thousands of pounds of gold, which again, you don't have. And especially when you need to, you know, raise new armies, you need money for that. You need money to pay the soldiers. And so paying, you know, thinking that, oh, well, we'll give Alaric another title and that'll make things okay and he won't attack us anymore. No. If you want a more modern equivalent to this, think appeasement leading up to World War II with Europe and the Nazis, right? If we just give Hitler the Sudetenland, if we just let Hitler occupy, you know, Silesia, if we just give him this, you know, maybe they'll stop. No, this was what Churchill said. You know, just continuing to cede more and more ground to these people is not going to help you out. And, you know, you have to deal with the reality. You're either going to fight them now or you're going to fight them later. And you can either be unprepared to fight them now, but at least you have some more money and you maybe have a little more leverage because you haven't been so, you haven't conceded so much, or you fight them later while you're still not really prepared, but now you're strapped for cash. Yeah. Take your pick. So then Alaric is going to invade Italy in 401. And the invasion is ultimately repelled by Stellico, and Stellico ends up actually re-subjugating again the Visigoths. But there's interestingly a kind of friendly relationship between Stellico and Alaric. During this time period, at least between now and between 401 and Stellico's death, The relationship between the Romans and the Visigoths is actually not bad. And so maybe there's some sort of mutual respect between Alaric and Stellico. Maybe Alaric views Stellico as a worthy adversary, and you got the better of me in a fair fight, and so I'm going to I have this respect for this guy who's also very, very accomplished militarily speaking. It's very odd. Not exactly what you would expect, especially given the track record of how things have gone between the Goths and the Romans up until this point. Now, however, unfortunately, we are going to end up in a situation where Stellico, there are rumors that start to come up that Stellico is going to attempt to usurp the imperial throne for himself and for his son. Now, Honorius, who I've already described as a blockhead, a moron, a putz, a fool, the IQ of a pork chop, which might be, pigs are intelligent animals. I really shouldn't insult pigs like that. So these rumors come up that Stellico is going to attempt some sort of a coup, basically. And Honorius ends up believing them, and he has Stellico arrested and executed in August of 408. Now, I don't believe for one moment that these rumors about Stellico are true. He's proved himself a loyal servant to the Roman Empire. Again, he's the glue that's holding this thing together. Were it not for Stellico, Western Rome would have been in much worse shape, much faster. So I don't believe that he was contemplating usurping at all. But really, Stellico is one of the few things that stands between the Western Romans and collapse. And we definitely see this because 6 weeks after Stellico's execution, Alaric leads another invasion into Italy. Excuse me. And Alaric has his sights set on the Western Roman capital. Well, not the capital at the time, although Ravenna is the capital of the Western Roman Empire at this point in time because it's a little more easily defensible. Rome is still the eternal city. It's still where all the money's at. It's estimated that Rome is the most populated city in the world at this point in time. Maybe you could find some cities in China or India that had more people, but certainly in the Western world is the most populated city at the time, which is interesting, even more than Constantinople. Interesting. And so we see here on the map, the red lines you have here are the route that the Visigoths take. So you can see the initial red lines in Italy are the invasion, is Alaric's invasion of Italy, and then later on they're going to move further west as they go into Spain and they fight. Like I said, they're going to fight the Vandals there, and they're going to establish the Visigothic kingdom of Spain there. And then the orange line we have there are the Ostrogoths, who are going to come in later, and we'll talk about, and they establish their kingdom in Italy, which will be the ultimate, kind of the watershed 476 moment of the fall of Rome, Western Rome at least. And apparently, Alaric's invasion of Italy is very easy. There's little resistance. The historian Zosimus describes it as a walk to a festival, right? So imagine you're walking to like a neighborhood block party is like how Alaric was marching through Italy. And he does actually siege Rome, I think, several times. I believe there's one siege in like 407 or 408. Or no, well, it would have to be 408 couldn't be 407 because the invasion starts in 408. So there's a siege of Rome in 408, and then they back off it. There's a siege of Rome in 409, and then they back off it. And then in 410, you have is when the Visigoths sack Rome. Immeasurable wealth is taken, but however, fortunately, not a whole lot of buildings seem to be damaged. It's more one of the more, I guess, if you could call it a civilized sack of a city, certainly not as destructive as it could have been. And I want to read for you a brief excerpt from the book, which I've been referencing a lot, and I'll show you the title. I'll show you the cover page here, that I've been using for a lot of research for this. Again, this is The Fall of the Roman Empire, A New History of Rome and the Barbarians by Peter Heather. I really should just ask somebody who knows how his last name is pronounced. Because I'm sure not that he'll actually end up watching this, but I should at least give the man the respect of saying his last name right. But anyways, so this is what he says in the book describing the 410 sack of Rome by the Visigoths. And he says, by all accounts, there followed one of the most civilized sacks of a city ever witnessed. Alaric's Goths were Christian and treated many of Rome's holiest places with great respect. The two main basilicas of St. Peter and St. Paul were nominated places of sanctuary. Those who fled there were left in peace, and refugees to Africa later reported with astonishment how the Goths had even conducted certain holy ladies there, particularly one Marcella, before methodically ransacking their house. So essentially, this was a nun who they basically had leave her house, leave the house where she was living in, treated her seemingly rather respectfully before they stole all of her stuff. I guess at least she didn't get raped, right? Not that everyone, not even all of the city's nuns, fared so well, but the Christian Goths did keep their religious affiliation firmly in view, right? The Goths are, the Visigoths are Arian Christians. They're not Nicene Orthodox Christians, the Christianity endorsed by the Roman Empire, but they're still Christians nonetheless. And so there is kind of this baseline idea of, well, maybe we shouldn't burn the churches down, which is nice of them. Like, I gotta give them credit for that. One huge silver ciborium weighing roughly 2,025 pounds, which was a gift from the Emperor Constantine, was lifted from the Lateran Palace, but the liturgical vessels of St. Peter's were left in situ. The Lateran is where the Pope resides until the Vatican is built later on in the, late 1400s, I believe, is when it's, I believe it's completed in the late 1400s, early 1500s. I'd have to double check that, but the Pope resides at the Lateran for a very long time. Actually, really a majority of the history of Christianity. Structural damage, too, was largely limited to the area of the Salarian Gate and the old Senate House. All in all, after 3 days of Gothic attentions, the vast majority of the city's monuments and buildings remained intact, even if stripped of their movable valuables. So as we see here, interestingly, as it says, the most civilized sack, the most peaceful sack, fiery but mostly peaceful, was the Visigothic sack of Rome in 4010. And I'll just go back to the map here for a minute, right? And so, as I said, the Visigoths are going to progressively move further and further west. They're actually going to fight together with the Romans, I believe, at one point to kind of kick. Really, it's the Alans. So when the Vandals come across into Roman territory, they're going to come. It's going to be sort of a confederation of a big three of tribes. You're going to have the Vandals, the Suebi, and the Alans. And actually, at the time of the crossing, it's the Alans that are the most powerful of those tribes, and they're all going to kind of settle in the Iberian Peninsula and kind of split it up among the three of them. And the Romans and the Visigoths are going to kind of team up to fight them. And the most powerful at the time of those three is are the Alans, and so they're going to get knocked down a peg after that fight, and it's going to leave the Vandals as the most powerful of the three remaining tribes. But the Visigoths are still going to really push them further and further south into the Iberian Peninsula, and the Vandals they'll eventually sail over to North Africa and establish a kingdom there, and the Visigoths are going to have their kingdom in in the Iberian Peninsula, which is going to last until about 711, when the Moorish invasion of Spain occurs, and you're going to see Muslim rule on the Iberian Peninsula for quite a while, which will be the reason for the Reconquista, the Spanish Reconquista, reconquering Spain and the Iberian Peninsula from the Moors. And that's, oops, almost knocked my water over there. And that's one of the more interesting aspects of the Crusades. A lot of times, a lot of attention is focused on the Crusades in the Middle East. However, just as interesting and actually successful crusade is the one that goes on in Spain, right? The Crusaders only managed to retake Jerusalem for a brief period of time. The Reconquista that goes on in Spain actually is one of the few instances where you have where the Muslims took over a Christian nation, and then Christians later on came back to retake. Now, they weren't necessarily the Vandals, or sorry, the Visigoths, there I go again. But it is far more successful than what happens for the Crusaders in the Levant. So that'll do it for our conversation today about the Visigoths. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you've made it this far into the video, please give the video a like if you're watching on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. As we get this show going, as I get this series kind of moving here, I do appreciate everybody who's listening and watching. It definitely means a lot. I do work a full-time job, and so this is a fun thing to do on the side, but obviously it takes up a good amount of time researching and reading for this, and then writing the lecture, the show notes. So I do appreciate everyone who's watching and listening. Please, if you like what you're seeing, share it on social media. Tell friends and family about it. If you're a student at university and you're studying this stuff, show your classmates. I would imagine that would be something you all would be interested in. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Play, give us a follow and a 5-star review. We do have an Instagram account. I didn't mention that earlier, but academics_95, that's ACADEMIX_95, where you can get updates to the show. We'll post memes and other interesting things about Roman history, medieval history, Byzantine history, which is essentially still Roman history, but just to use the term that everybody is familiar with. And then we do have a Twitter account as well. You can find us there. Professor Ren, you can give us a follow there if Twitter is your social media of choice. But that is all I have for you today. So again, thank you for listening and watching, and I'll see y'all next time.